A private jet slices through the clouds carrying billionaire CEO Alexander Sterling to a secret weekend in Geneva with his mistress. He believes he's a master of deception, leaving his pregnant wife, Amelia, none the wiser in their Park Avenue penthouse. But he has made a fatal miscalculation. Alexander's power built an empire, but it also created a blind spot. He never saw his wife as a threat. Now, armed with a team of private investigators and knowledge of a crime that goes far beyond infidelity, Amelia is waiting. With one perfectly timed phone call, she's about to prove that hell hath no fury, like a woman with $1 billion inheritance and a plan for total annihilation. The scent of 1,000 white roses, flown in that morning from Ecuador, should have been a comfort. For Amelia Davenport, however, it was the cloying fragrance of a beautiful lie. The roses, a weekly standing order from her husband, filled their palatial penthouse on Park Avenue, a constant, almost aggressive reminder of his supposed devotion. But for the past 3 months, the thorns had felt more real than the petals. Amelia. 6 months pregnant with their first child, a boy they had already named Spencer, ran a manicured hand over the smooth, cool marble of the kitchen island. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished chrome of the Sub-Zero refrigerator, a woman who seemingly had it all. At 28, she was the wife of Alexander Sterling, the charismatic 35-year-old CEO of Sterling Global, a sprawling conglomerate with tentacles in everything from aerospace technology to luxury hospitality. Their wedding, a lavish affair at the Palace of Versailles, had been the society event of the year, a union of old money and new ambition. Amelia's family, the Davenports, were a Boston institution, their wealth rooted in shipping and banking for generations. Alexander, on the other hand, was a self-made titan, a man whose relentless drive had propelled him from a modest background to the zenith of the financial world. He was handsome, charming, and until recently, Amelia had believed utterly hers. The first crack in the facade had been almost imperceptible. A late-night board meeting that stretched until 3 a.m., a business trip to Hong Kong that her father, a man with an almost psychic understanding of global commerce, casually mentioned seemed odd given the current market climate. Then came the whispers, the subtle shifts in Alexander's behavior. He started guarding his phone with the ferocity of a Cerberus, its screen always angled away from her. The lingering scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, a faint, musky jasmine, clung to his clothes on more than one occasion. When she'd asked, he'd laughed it off. Must have been a long hug with one of the investors' wives, darling. You know how the French are. But Amelia wasn't a fool. She had been raised in a world where women were expected to be beautiful, gracious hostesses, and above all, discreet. They were taught to turn a blind eye to the indiscretions of their powerful husbands, to preserve the sanctity of the family name and the fortune it represented. Her own mother, a woman of impeccable breeding and even more impeccable Chanel suits, had once told her, "Men of their stature, my dear, have appetites. It is a wife's duty to be the main course, not to concern herself with the occasional amuse-bouche." For a while, Amelia had tried to heed that advice. She had tried to swallow the bitter pill of suspicion, to focus on the baby growing inside her, the future of the Sterling Davenport dynasty. She had thrown herself into designing the nursery, a celestial-themed wonderland of navy blues and gold, with a hand-painted mural of the constellations on the ceiling. She hosted charity galas, her baby bump, a symbol of fecundity and domestic bliss, all while a quiet, cold dread coiled in her stomach. The turning point had come a week ago. Alexander had been in the shower and his phone left carelessly on the cashmere throw of their 4-poster bed, buzzed incessantly. It was a new phone, a sleek, custom-made device from a boutique tech firm in Switzerland, ostensibly for enhanced security. He had two of them, one for business, one for personal use. This was the personal one. On the lock screen, a series of messages from a name she didn't recognize flashed in quick succession. "Geneva can't come soon enough. Counting the hours. I've booked our usual suite at the Four Seasons de Berg," and then the one that made the blood drain from her face. "Don't worry about the bird in the gilded cage. She won't suspect a thing." The bird in the gilded cage. The casual cruelty of it, the dismissive arrogance, had shattered what little composure Amelia had left. She was not just a wife being cheated on. She was an object, a pretty possession to be managed and deceived. In that moment, something within her shifted. The compliant, well-bred heiress receded, and a woman she hadn't known existed, a woman forged in the crucible of betrayal, began to emerge. That night, she didn't confront him. Instead, she played the part of the doting, slightly tired pregnant wife to perfection. She listened attentively as he spoke of a last-minute, unavoidable business trip to Geneva. A crucial meeting with a Swiss banking consortium. He'd explained, his eyes the color of a stormy sea, filled with a convincing sincerity. "It's a deal that could redefine the European arm of global for the next decade," he'd said, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "I'll only be gone for 48 hours, my love. I'll be back before you even have a chance to miss me." Amelia had smiled a sweet, understanding smile and wished him well. "Of course, darling. Business is business. Spencer and I will be waiting for you." But as he packed his handmade leather carry-on, meticulously folding his bespoke suits, Amelia was making her own plans. She had spent her life surrounded by power, and she had learned its lessons well. Information was the ultimate weapon, and she was about to arm herself to the teeth. Her first call was to a man her father had used for years, a discreet and ruthlessly efficient private investigator named Robert Miller. Miller was a ghost, a former MI6 agent who now ran a boutique security firm in London, catering to the ultra-wealthy. He specialized in the kind of problems that couldn't be solved with a simple lawsuit or a public relations statement. He was expensive, but for the daughter of a Davenport, that was of little consequence. Mr. Miller. Amelia had said, her voice steady and cold, a stark contrast to the maelstrom of emotions raging within her. "I have a job for you. My husband, Alexander Sterling, is flying to Geneva tomorrow on his private jet. A Gulfstream G650 tail number S. He believes he is going for a business meeting. I believe he is meeting his mistress. I want to know everything. Who she is, where they go, what they do. I want photographic and video evidence, and I want it to be irrefutable." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Miller's clipped British accent. "Understood, Mrs. Sterling. We have a team in Geneva. Consider it done. The usual channels for payment." "Of course," Amelia replied, "and Mr. Miller discretion is paramount. No one, especially not my husband or my father, is to know of my involvement. My client's confidentiality is the cornerstone of my business, Mrs. Sterling. You have my word." Now, as the morning sun streamed into her pristine kitchen, casting long shadows across the floor, Amelia felt a strange sense of calm. The waiting was the hardest part. Alexander's jet had taken off from Teterboro Airport an hour ago. She had tracked its flight path online, a thin blue line arcing across the Atlantic, a digital representation of her husband's deceit. He thought he was flying towards a weekend of illicit passion. He had no idea he was flying into the eye of a storm that she, his pregnant wife, was about to unleash. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart, the number of a woman who owed her a favor, a woman whose career was built on exposing the very kind of secrets Alexander was so desperate to keep. A woman named Cassandra Vance, the host of the world's most popular and feared gossip podcast, The Vance Report. Cassandra Amelia said, her voice as smooth as silk. "I have a story for you, a story that's going to make you more famous than you ever dreamed possible." The crisp, clean air of Geneva was a welcome change from the humid bite of a New York summer. As Alexander Sterling stepped off his jet at the private terminal of Geneva Airport, he felt a familiar thrill, a heady mix of power and anticipation. He was a man who thrived on conquest in the boardroom, and he had to admit in other more clandestine arenas. The deal with the Swiss bankers was real, a convenient and necessary piece of business that provided the perfect cover for the true purpose of his trip, a weekend with her. His mistress was a woman named Katerina Petrova, a name as sharp and elegant as her cheekbones. She was the 30-year-old head of art acquisitions for a rival Russian oligarch, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her ambition. They had met 6 months ago at an art auction at Christie's in London, where they had engaged in a fierce bidding war over a rare Monet. Alexander had won the painting, but Katerina, with her smouldering dark eyes and a wit as sharp as a shard of glass, had captured his attention. Their affair had begun that night, a whirlwind of stolen weekends in Paris, clandestine meetings in Dubai, and whispered promises in the back of chauffeured cars. Katerina was everything Amelia was not. Where Amelia was soft, Katerina was sharp. Where Amelia was old money and quiet grace. Katerina was a self-made vixen, a woman who had clawed her way up from obscurity and was unapologetic about her desires. She was a challenge, an intoxicating escape from the predictable, staid world he inhabited with his wife. The pregnancy had only amplified this feeling. The impending fatherhood felt less like a joy and more like a closing of a chapter, a final irrevocable step into a life of duty and responsibility. Katerina was his last taste of freedom, his rebellion against the gilded cage he had so carefully constructed for himself. A sleek black Mercedes S-Class was waiting for him on the tarmac. As he slid into the plush leather interior, his phone buzzed. A message from Katerina. "Suite 702. Don't keep me waiting." He smiled. The game was afoot. Meanwhile, a few hundred meters away, in a nondescript rental car, parked with a clear view of the private terminal, 2 men sat in silence. They were part of Robert Miller's team, a pair of ex-Special Forces soldiers who were now highly paid operatives in the world of corporate espionage and private investigation. They were patient, methodical, and utterly invisible. A long-lens camera with a state-of-the-art image stabilizer rested on the dashboard, its lens trained on the Mercedes. Every movement, every detail was being captured. The lead operative, a stoic Englishman named Thomas, spoke into a small encrypted communication device. "Target has landed. He's in a black S-Class license plate, GE7789. We are mobile, tracking his movements, sending live feed to the secure server now." Thousands of miles away in her darkened home office, overlooking Central Park, Amelia watched the live feed on a large, high-definition monitor. She saw the familiar, confident swagger of her husband as he walked towards the waiting car. She saw the slight smile on his face as he looked at his phone. A wave of nausea unrelated to her pregnancy washed over her. It was one thing to suspect, to know in your gut that you were being betrayed. It was another thing entirely to watch it unfold in real time, in crystal clear high definition. Her hand trembled as she reached for a glass of water. She had to stay strong. This was not the time for tears or weakness. This was the time for cold, calculated precision. She had a plan, a multi-pronged attack that would not only expose Alexander, but also protect her and her unborn child. The first phase was already in motion. Robert Miller's team would gather the evidence, the irrefutable proof of the affair. Phase 2 involved Cassandra Vance. Amelia had given Cassandra the exclusive, the promise of a story that would rock the foundations of New York society. But she had given her strict instructions. The story was not to be released until Amelia gave the signal. The timing had to be perfect. Phase 3 was the most complex and the most dangerous. It involved Sterling Global. Amelia, despite her society girl exterior, had a keen mind for business, a trait she had inherited from her father. She had sat on the board of several of her family's charitable foundations and had a better understanding of corporate governance than Alexander gave her credit for. For the past week, since discovering the messages on his phone, she had been secretly consulting with a team of forensic accountants and corporate lawyers, a team so discreet they communicated only through encrypted channels and were paid in untraceable cryptocurrency. She had instructed them to conduct a deep dive into Sterling Global's finances, specifically looking for any anomalies, any unusual transactions or shell corporations that could be linked to Alexander's personal activities. She had a hunch, a gut feeling that his recklessness in his personal life might extend to his professional one. If she could find evidence of financial impropriety, she would have leverage that went far beyond mere infidelity. It would be the difference between a messy public divorce and a carefully orchestrated corporate takeover. Back in Geneva, Alexander's Mercedes pulled up to the grand entrance of the Four Seasons de Bergue, a bastion of old-world luxury on the shores of Lake Geneva. He was greeted by the hotel manager, a man who knew him well and was the soul of discretion. "Welcome back, Mr. Sterling. Everything is prepared as you requested." "Thank you, Jean-Luc," Alexander said, slipping a crisp €100 note into the manager's hand. "You know how much I value your attention to detail." He bypassed the lobby, taking a private elevator directly to the 7th floor. He walked down the hushed, thickly carpeted hallway to Suite 702, the Royal Suite, a sprawling apartment with panoramic views of the lake and the Jet d'Eau. He opened the door, and there she was. Katerina was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of champagne in her hand, wearing a silk robe that clung to her slender frame. She turned a slow, predatory smile on her face. "You're late," she purred, her Russian accent thick and seductive. "I had to make a stop," Alexander said, his voice low. He walked towards her, his eyes devouring her. He had brought her a gift, a small velvet box from Graf, a jeweler known for its outrageously expensive and rare diamonds. Inside was a necklace, a cascade of canary-yellow diamonds that must have cost a small fortune. Katerina's eyes widened as she saw it. "For me, you shouldn't have." But her hands were already reaching for it, her fingers tracing the cold, hard facets of the stones. From a building across the street, another of Miller's operatives, a woman with the steady hands of a surgeon, captured the entire scene through the lens of a powerful telescope camera. The gift, the embrace, the passionate kiss that followed. Every frame was a nail in the coffin of Alexander Sterling's marriage. Amelia watched it all on her screen, her face a mask of stone. The pain was a physical thing, a sharp, stabbing ache in her chest. But beneath the pain, a cold, hard anger was beginning to crystallize. She saw the diamond necklace, a bauble purchased with the money that was supposed to be building a future for their son. She saw the way he looked at Katerina, a look of raw hunger he hadn't given her in years. She picked up her phone. It was time for Phase 2 to be set in motion. She dialed Cassandra Vance. "Cassandra," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I have an update for you. And a name. Katerina Petrova, head of art acquisitions for the Antonov Group. They're at the Four Seasons des Bergues in Geneva. Suite 702. And he just gave her a very, very expensive necklace." She could almost hear the salacious grin in Cassandra's voice. "This is pure gold, Amelia. Pure gold. When do I get to run with it?" "Soon," Amelia said. "But not yet. I want to let him enjoy his little getaway for a while longer. I want him to feel safe and secure. And then when he least expects it, we're going to burn his world to the ground." She hung up the phone and turned her attention back to the monitor. The live feed from Geneva now showed Alexander and Katerina, champagne glasses in hand, laughing on the balcony of their suite, the city lights twinkling behind them like 1,000 judging eyes. They looked like a king and queen surveying their domain, but they were oblivious to the fact that their kingdom was built on a foundation of lies, a foundation that was about to crumble. And Amelia, the woman they had so carelessly dismissed as the bird in the gilded cage, was the one holding the detonator. For the next 24 hours, Amelia became a ghost in her own home, a silent observer of a life that was no longer hers. She moved through the opulent rooms of the penthouse like a spectre, her phone and tablet her only companions. The live feeds from Robert Miller's team in Geneva were a constant, brutal stream of her husband's betrayal. She watched him and Katerina dine at a Michelin-starred restaurant, their heads bent close together in intimate conversation. She saw them strolling hand in hand along the shores of Lake Geneva, their silhouettes stark against the setting sun. She watched them return to the hotel, their arms wrapped around each other, disappearing into the gilded cage of their suite. Each image was a fresh wound, a new layer of pain. But with the pain came a chilling clarity. The grief was still there, a heavy, suffocating blanket. But it was now interwoven with a steely resolve. She was no longer just a heartbroken wife. She was a woman on a mission, a general marshalling her forces for a war she had no intention of losing. Her days were a blur of encrypted calls and secure video conferences with her legal and financial teams. The forensic accountants, a team of brilliant but socially awkward geniuses who operated out of a nondescript office in Zurich, had been working around the clock. They were sifting through the labyrinthine financial records of Sterling Global, following the digital breadcrumbs that Alexander, in his arrogance, had surely left behind. The breakthrough came on the second day of Alexander's trip. Amelia was on a conference call with the head of the accounting team, a man who went only by the name of Orion. "We've found something, Mrs. Sterling Orion," said his voice, a dry, dispassionate monotone. "It's clever, very clever, but not clever enough." He explained that Alexander had set up a series of shell corporations registered in a constellation of tax havens, the Cayman Islands, Panama, the British Virgin Islands. On the surface, these companies appeared to be legitimate investment vehicles, part of Sterling Global's complex international strategy. But when Orion's team peeled back the layers of legal and financial obfuscation, they found the truth. "He's been using these shell companies to siphon money from Sterling Global," Orion explained. "Small amounts at first, a few $100,000 here and there, disguised as consulting fees or finder's fees. But the amounts have been increasing exponentially over the past 6 months. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars, Mrs. Sterling." Amelia's blood ran cold. This was far worse than she had imagined. This wasn't just infidelity. This was embezzlement on a massive scale. "Where is the money going?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "That's the interesting part," Orion replied. "It's being funneled into a single account at a private bank in Liechtenstein. The account is held by a trust, and the sole beneficiary of that trust is a woman named Katerina Petrova." Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. The diamond necklace was a trinket. This was the real prize. He wasn't just having an affair with Katerina. He was financing her. He was stealing from his own company, from their future, from their son, to build a new life with his mistress. And there's more. Orion continued. One of the shell corporations, a company called Apex Holdings, was used to purchase a property. A very expensive property. He sent her a file. Amelia opened it to find the deed and architectural plans for a stunning modernist villa perched on a cliffside in Portofino, Italy. The villa, still under construction, was a masterpiece of glass and steel, with an infinity pool that seemed to melt into the Ligurian Sea. The purchase price was a staggering 25 million euros. And the owner of record was Apex Holdings. The sheer audacity of it, the depth of his deception was breathtaking. He wasn't just planning a weekend getaway. He was building a new life, a new home, a new future, all with stolen money. And he was doing it right under her nose. "I need you to document everything Orion," Amelia said, her voice now hard as steel. "Every transaction, every email, every wire transfer. I want a file so thick and so irrefutable that it will bury him." "Consider it done, Mrs. Sterling. We'll have a complete dossier ready for you within the hour." After the call ended, Amelia sat in silence for a long time. The architectural plans for the Portofino villa glowing on her screen. The beautiful house meant for another woman was a monument to his betrayal. But it was also his greatest vulnerability. It was the loose thread that, when pulled, would unravel his entire world. She thought of her father, a man of uncompromising principles, a man who valued integrity and honor above all else. He was a member of Sterling Global's board of directors, a position he had taken to mentor Alexander and guide the young CEO. He had trusted Alexander. He had welcomed him into their family. The discovery of the affair would be a deep personal blow to him, but the discovery of the embezzlement would be an unforgivable sin, a betrayal of everything her father stood for. She knew what she had to do. It was time to bring her father into the fold. But she had to be careful. She had to present it to him in a way that would force him to act not just as a hurt father, but as a responsible board member with a fiduciary duty to the company and its shareholders. Meanwhile, in Geneva, Alexander Sterling was feeling invincible. The business meeting with the Swiss bankers had gone exceptionally well. They had agreed in principle to a new line of credit for Sterling Global's European expansion, a deal that would be hailed as a major coup in the financial press. His weekend with Katerina had been a perfect, intoxicating escape. As he packed his bags to return to New York, he felt a sense of renewed vigor. He believed he had successfully compartmentalized his life, that he could have it all: the respectable pregnant wife, and the prestigious family name in New York, and the passionate, exciting mistress tucked away for his personal pleasure. His phone rang. It was Amelia. He let it ring for a moment, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips, the bird in the gilded cage calling to her master. He finally answered his voice, a smooth, practiced mask of affection. Hello, my love. I was just thinking of you. The meetings went better than I could have ever hoped. I'm on my way to the airport now. I'll be home before you know it. That's wonderful, darling. Amelia's voice came through the phone, as sweet and syrupy as honey. But underneath the sweetness, there was a new, unfamiliar note, a hint of something cold and sharp. I have a surprise for you when you get back. Something I think you'll find illuminating. A surprise. I love surprises. Alexander said, a slight unease beginning to prickle at the back of his neck. What is it? You'll have to wait and see. Amelia replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper. But I will give you a hint. It involves a woman named Katerina Petrova, a villa in Portofino, and the board of directors of Sterling Global. The phone went dead. Alexander stood frozen in the middle of his hotel suite, the phone still pressed to his ear. The blood drained from his face. Katerina. Portofino. The board of directors. It was impossible. How could she know? How could she possibly know? A wave of panic, cold and sickening, washed over him. He looked around the suite at the rumpled bed, the empty champagne bottle, the lingering scent of Katerina's perfume. The walls of his carefully constructed world were beginning to close in on him. The bird was no longer in the gilded cage. She was out, and she was coming for him. He scrambled to call his office, his lawyer, anyone who could tell him what was happening. But it was too late. The storm he had never seen coming was about to break, and he was standing directly in its path. The flight back to New York was the longest 8 hours of Alexander Sterling's life. The luxurious cabin of his Gulfstream, usually a sanctuary of calm and control, felt like a prison cell hurtling through the sky. He paced the plush carpeting like a sauced animal, his mind racing, trying to piece together how his carefully constructed world had so spectacularly imploded. Katerina. Portofino. The board of directors. Amelia's words echoed in his ears, a death knell for the life he knew. He had tried to call Katerina, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He had tried to call his contacts at the bank in Liechtenstein, but they were stonewalling him, citing client confidentiality. Every door he tried to open was being slammed shut in his face. He was flying blind into a hurricane, and the name of the hurricane was Amelia. He had underestimated her. He had seen her as a beautiful, docile creature, a perfect ornament for his life of power and success. He had never imagined the steel that lay beneath the silk, the sharp, strategic mind that was hidden behind her polite society smile. He had made the fatal mistake of confusing grace with weakness. When the jet finally landed at Teterboro, he wasn't greeted by his usual driver. Instead, a grim-faced man in a dark suit he didn't recognize was waiting for him on the tarmac. "Mr. Sterling," the man said, his voice flat and impersonal. "I'm here to escort you to an emergency board meeting at the Sterling Global headquarters." A board meeting. "Now it's the middle of the night," Alexander protested, his voice laced with a panic he could no longer conceal. "The board has been convened, sir. It is not a request." The ride into Manhattan was silent and tense. The familiar, glittering skyline of the city he had conquered now seemed menacing. Its towering buildings like tombstones in a graveyard of his own making. As they pulled up to the Sterling Global Tower, a gleaming monument to his ambition, he saw a crowd of reporters and photographers gathered at the entrance, their cameras flashing like a volley of gunfire. The news had broken. While Alexander was in the air, Cassandra Vance had dropped the bomb. Her podcast, The Vance Report, had released a special episode, an explosive exposé detailing the affair between Alexander Sterling and Katerina Petrova. It had everything: the clandestine trip to Geneva, the name of the hotel, the suite number, the diamond necklace. It was a brutal, meticulous takedown, and it had spread like wildfire across the internet. By the time Alexander's plane touched down, his name was trending on Twitter, and his face was plastered across every gossip blog and news site on the planet. But the affair was only the opening salvo. Amelia had saved the real ammunition for the board meeting. He was ushered through a back entrance avoiding the media circus and taken directly to the boardroom on the 50th floor. The room, usually a testament to his power, was now an arena for his execution. The long, polished mahogany table was filled with the stern, unforgiving faces of the board of directors. At the head of the table in the chairman's seat sat Amelia's father, William Davenport, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. And next to him in the seat that was rightfully Alexander's sat Amelia. She was dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, her pregnancy a silent, powerful statement in the room. She looked calm, composed, her eyes clear and steady. The bird in the gilded cage was gone. In her place was a woman who was every bit as formidable as any titan of industry in that room. Alexander William Davenport's voice was like the crack of a whip cutting through the thick, tense silence. "Thank you for joining us. We have much to discuss." Alexander opened his mouth to speak, to offer some defense, some explanation, but Amelia cut him off. "There's no need for pleasantries, father," she said, her voice ringing with an authority that stunned the room into silence. She stood up, and on the large screen behind her, the screen usually reserved for projecting quarterly earnings and market analyses, an image appeared. It was a high-resolution photograph of Alexander and Katerina kissing on the balcony of their suite in Geneva. A collective gasp went through the room. Alexander felt the last of his composure crumble. He was exposed, humiliated, his betrayal laid bare for all to see. "As you can see," Amelia continued, her voice cold and even, "my husband has been preoccupied. His recent trip to Geneva, which he claimed was for a crucial business meeting, was in fact a romantic rendezvous with his mistress, a Miss Katerina Petrova." She then proceeded with the calm, methodical precision of a seasoned prosecutor to lay out her case. She presented the photographs and video footage from Robert Miller's team, a damning visual record of the affair. She played a recording of her final phone call with Alexander, the one where he had lied so effortlessly about the success of his business meetings. But she didn't stop there. This was not just about infidelity. This was about the future of the company. "My husband's personal indiscretions, while deeply painful to me, are not the primary reason we are here tonight," she said, her eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of the board members. "His recklessness extends far beyond his marriage vows. It threatens the very foundation of this company." On the screen behind her, the images of the affair were replaced by a complex web of flowcharts and financial statements. It was the dossier prepared by Orion and his team. Amelia, with the help of her corporate lawyer, who was sitting quietly in a corner of the room, began to walk the board through Alexander's elaborate scheme of embezzlement. She exposed the shell corporations, the fraudulent invoices, the siphoning of millions of dollars of company funds. She showed them the wire transfers to Katerina Petrova's secret bank account in Liechtenstein. And then for the grand finale, she displayed the architectural plans for the €25 million villa in Portofino, a lavish love nest built with stolen money. The boardroom was sent the only sound, the soft hum of the air conditioning. The board members, titans of finance and industry men who had seen it all, were staring at the screen in stunned disbelief. They were looking at a fraud of breathtaking audacity, a betrayal of trust that went to the very core of their corporate ethos. Alexander stood there, stripped bare, his lies and deceptions exposed to the harsh, unforgiving light of the boardroom. He looked at Amelia, really looked at her, and for the first time he saw the woman he had married. Not the pretty, pliable heiress, but a queen, a warrior, a woman who had just checkmated him in the most public and brutal way imaginable. William Davenport finally broke the silence. He stood up, his face etched with a profound and terrible sadness, but his voice was firm. In light of this evidence, he said the word catching in his throat. I have no choice but to call for a vote of no confidence in our CEO, Alexander Sterling. Furthermore, I propose that we immediately launch a full-scale independent forensic audit of the company's finances and turn over all of our findings to the relevant authorities, including the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice. He looked at Alexander, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and contempt. You have disgraced yourself. You have disgraced this company, and you have disgraced my family. You are finished. The vote was a mere formality. One by one, the board members raised their hands, a forest of condemnation. Alexander Sterling, the golden boy of Wall Street, the master of the universe, was unanimously and unceremoniously stripped of his title, his power, and his future. As security guards entered the room to escort him from the building, he looked at Amelia one last time. Her face was impassive, but her eyes for a fleeting moment betrayed a flicker of the immense pain he had caused her. But there was no triumph in her gaze, no gloating. There was only a quiet, sad resolve. He had built an empire, but he had forgotten the one rule that governs all empires. They are in the end vulnerable, and his had been brought down not by a corporate raider or a market crash, but by the one person he thought he had under his complete control. His wife. The fall of Alexander Sterling was not a gentle decline. It was a seismic event that sent shockwaves rippling from Wall Street to the highest echelons of global finance. The morning after the boardroom blitz, Sterling Global was a company besieged. The stock, a blue-chip behemoth, for a decade opened in a free-fall hemorrhaging value with every passing minute. On the trading floor, the ticker symbol SG flashed a violent, panicked red, a digital scream of investor flight. Billions in market capitalization evaporated into the ether. The life's work of thousands of employees and the fortunes of investors turning to dust on the whim of a disgraced CEO's libido and greed. Inside the gleaming Sterling Global Tower, the atmosphere was a toxic cocktail of fear and chaos. Employees who had once walked the halls with the confident swagger of industry leaders now gathered in hushed, anxious clusters around coffee machines and in hushed conference rooms, their eyes glued to the rolling news tickers on their computer screens. Every major news network was leading with the story. The meticulously curated photographs from Robert Miller's team were everywhere. The image of Alexander and Katerina on the Geneva balcony, now an iconic symbol of corporate hubris. The name Katerina Petrova was on everyone's lips, a phantom who had helped bring down a giant and then vanished as quickly as she had appeared. Rumors swirled that she had been spotted in Dubai, then Moscow, the stolen millions from the Liechtenstein account, ensuring she would live a life of luxury, far from the reach of any extradition treaty. The half-finished villa in Portofino became a tourist attraction for yachts sailing the Italian Riviera, a modern-day ruin of a fallen king. For Alexander, the 24 hours following his expulsion from the boardroom were a descent into a personal hell. Hiding out in a friend's multi-million-dollar Soho loft, he was a man unraveling. The friend, a hedge fund manager who had made a fortune on Alexander's tips, had offered the refuge out of a sense of past obligation, but his welcome was thin and laced with the fear of association. Alexander, unshaven and fueled by whiskey and rage, frantically worked the phones, calling in favors from men who had once clamored for his attention. But the calls went unanswered. His contacts in banking and politics, in the media, all had become ghosts. He was radioactive, a pariah. His attempts to move what little money he had left in personal accounts were blocked, every transaction flagged by financial institutions, now under immense scrutiny. He was trapped, his vast wealth now a digital mirage he could see but not touch. His world had shrunk to the four walls of a borrowed apartment, the city he once owned, now a hostile territory. The end came, as it often does, in the quiet, grey light of dawn. The sharp, authoritative knock on the door was not a surprise, but it was a final, brutal confirmation of his utter ruin. As federal agents led him out in handcuffs, the flash bulbs of the waiting press were like a final, merciless fusillade. The man who had graced the cover of Forbes and Fortune, the titan of industry, was now just another perp walk, his bespoke suit a crumpled, pathetic symbol of how far he had fallen. For Amelia, the public spectacle of her husband's demise brought no joy, only a profound and weary sadness. She watched the news reports from the seclusion of her father's Upper East Side mansion, having fled the Park Avenue penthouse that now felt tainted by ghosts. Each image of Alexander's downfall was a fresh reminder of the man she had once loved, of the future she had believed in. The victory was absolute, but the cost had been immense. Her private pain had become public property, a global soap opera for the masses to consume. She was inundated with requests for interviews, with lucrative offers for books and movies. Cassandra Vance's podcast had shattered every record, making Cassandra a household name and Amelia a reluctant icon. She was hailed as a hero, a symbol of female empowerment. But in the quiet moments when the lawyers and consultants had gone, she felt only the deep ache of betrayal and the overwhelming weight of the future. It was in this state of exhaustion and uncertainty that her father, William Davenport, approached her with the proposition that would redefine her life. He found her in the library, staring out at the rain-streaked streets, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "The board is in agreement," he said, his voice gentle. "They want you to take over, as interim CEO." Amelia turned, her expression a mixture of disbelief and horror. "Absolutely not. Father, that's insane. I'm an art historian. I'm about to have a baby. What do I know about running a multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate?" "You know more than you think," William insisted, sitting beside her. "You have a mind for strategy, Amelia. I've seen it your whole life. You saw the rot in Sterling Global before anyone else did. You didn't just cry or run away. You gathered intelligence, you built a team, and you executed a flawless plan that decapitated the corruption at its source. That wasn't the act of a scorned wife. It was the act of a leader. It was the act of a woman trying to protect her child's future." She countered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want that life. I don't want to be in the spotlight. I want to build a nursery and raise my son in peace." "And you will," he said, taking her hand. "But think of the legacy you will build for him. Do you want his company, his inheritance, to be managed by a committee of strangers forever tainted by this scandal? Or do you want it to be led by his mother, the woman who saved it? You are the only person who can restore integrity to that name, Amelia." the only one who can signal a true, clean break from the past. The world thinks of you as a victim. This is your chance to show them who you really are, a survivor, a builder, the woman who took back her power. His words struck a chord deep within her. He was right. Hiding away would mean letting Alexander's actions define the company, and by extension, her son's legacy, forever. Stepping up, however terrifying, was the only way to truly reclaim the narrative, to build something new and clean from the wreckage. With a deep breath that felt like it was drawn from the very depths of her soul, Amelia Davenport nodded. "All right, Father. I'll do it." Her first day as interim CEO was a baptism by fire. The moment she stepped out of her car in front of the Sterling Global Tower, she was mobbed by a frenzied pack of reporters shouting questions. She walked through them with a calm, regal grace, her face a mask of serene determination, offering only a polite but firm no comment. Her first act was not to hole up in the 50th floor executive suite, but to call an all-hands meeting in the building's soaring glass atrium. Standing on a simple stage, she looked out at the thousands of employees, their faces a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. She was not the CEO they were used to. She was a woman, she was pregnant, and she was the wife of the man who had brought them to the brink of disaster. "I know what you are all thinking," she began, her voice clear and amplified by the microphone, yet retaining an intimate personal quality. "You are looking at me and wondering what a Davenport heiress, an art historian, can possibly do to fix this mess. The truth is, I cannot fix it alone. This company is not about one person. It was never supposed to be." She laid out the unvarnished truth of the scandal, her voice devoid of self-pity, but filled with a palpable anger at the betrayal of trust. Then she pivoted, laying out a vision for a new Sterling Global one, built on transparency, accountability, and a return to core values. She announced the immediate sale of the corporate jet and the fleet of executive cars. She cancelled the lavish multi-million-dollar leadership retreat Alexander had planned in Aspen. "The era of obscene excess at Sterling Global is over," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Our new currency will be trust. Our new status symbol will be integrity." The speech was met with a moment of stunned silence, then a ripple of applause that grew into a thunderous ovation. It was a masterstroke, a perfect blend of humility and strength that won over the hearts and minds of her most important asset, her people. In the weeks that followed, Amelia proved her words were not mere rhetoric. She was a whirlwind of focused energy, working 18-hour days with a discipline that impressed even the most hardened veterans on the board. She tore down the opaque corporate structure Alexander had built, replacing it with a more streamlined collaborative model. She promoted talented executives from within the company, many of whom had been overlooked by Alexander's boys' club culture. She proved to be a shrewd and decisive leader, her outsider's perspective allowing her to see problems and solutions that the entrenched old guard had missed. 2 months into her tenure, 3 months before her due date, she gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. In the quiet, sterile peace of the hospital room, away from the chaos of boardrooms and balance sheets, she held him in her arms and wept. They were tears of joy, of relief, and of a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. She named him Spencer William Davenport. He would carry her name, the name of a family that prized honor above all, and the name of the grandfather who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Holding her son, looking down at his small, sleeping face, Amelia felt the last vestiges of the victim fall away. The pain of Alexander's betrayal was a scar she would carry forever, a permanent part of her history. But it was no longer the defining chapter. She had stared into the abyss of a life destroyed, and had refused to fall. Instead, she had built a bridge across it. She was no longer a bird in a gilded cage, nor was she just the woman who had brought down a king. She was a queen in her own right, the architect of a new dynasty forged not from privilege, but from pain, resilience, and an unbreakable will. Her greatest work of art was not a painting on a wall, but the future she was now building for herself, for her company, and for her son. The saga of Amelia Davenport is a stark reminder that in the dazzling world of the super-rich, the deepest betrayals often come from those closest to us. It's a story of love, lies, and the astonishing power of a woman who refused to be a victim. Amelia's journey from a heartbroken pregnant wife to a formidable CEO serves as a powerful testament to her resilience and strategic brilliance. She didn't just get mad, she got everything. Her story resonates because it's a modern-day epic of justice proving that integrity and courage can ultimately triumph over deceit and greed. If this tale of high-stakes drama and ultimate vindication captivated you, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with your friends who love a story of powerful comebacks, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger and more compelling than fiction.